You're listening to Everything You Think You Know Is Wrong. My goal is to help individuals like you explore various ways to fully transform your life from the inside out. Today's guest is Peter Panagore. Peter holds a Master's of Divinity from Yale University. He also had not one, but two near-death experiences. His first near-death experience was in 1980 while he was ice climbing in Banff, Alberta. His second near-death experience was in 2015 when he had a heart attack. We're going to have a lot to talk about during this podcast. He's also the best-selling Audible author of Heaven is Beautiful, How Dying Taught Me That Death is Just the Beginning. And that's really the focus of this show, how his near-death experience transformed his life. He's also the author of 2 Minutes for God. It's a best-selling daily devotional. We will be discussing all the changes that he had in his life after having a near-death experience, where it took him, all of his cosmic adventures. And I'm really excited to have him on the show. He's one of the most interesting people I've come across in my life. It's going to be a good one. Stay tuned. Hey everyone, welcome to Everything You Think You Know Is Wrong. I'm your host, Valerie Gangas. And today I'm so excited to have Peter Panagore on the show. He is actually the most interesting man. It's not the Dos Equis guy, it's Peter. That's what I thought of when I thought of you. I'm like, they got that wrong. Not that dude, it's Peter. The most interesting man alive. So, Peter.
You're making me blush.
You are. I'm serious. I'm not handing out compliments here. I'm telling you the truth. As I said before, when I was reading you his bio, he has had two near-death experiences. The first one in 1980 when you were ice climbing. Who does that? Who does that? And the second one in 2015 when he had a heart attack. So this show is all about how people have these transformative experiences, whether it's through a near-death experience or meditating or drug use, whatever. I don't care how it comes to you. It's the idea is to talk about these experiences and make them more, thought of as normal and accessible, because they're not weird, they're not unusual. It's things that happen in our lives, break us open, changes the direction of our lives, and brings us closer to God. So that's why I created this podcast, so I could meet other people that had these types of experiences like I had learning to meditate. So I know for you, it started when you were younger, like you started having these mystical experiences when you were a kid. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
I was very little. Yes, each one has a story, so I'll try to keep it tight. But when I was about 6 years old, my brother moved into my room. He had just been born, and I was kind of pissed off, and I awoke one night to hear sound of my name being called from the hallway. And when I sat up in the bed, I could see my brother in his crib. The room had changed to a sepatone, and I could see in the dark, which was weird. And then I got up, and when I got up, I looked back and I saw my body lying in the bed, and I was out of my body, not understanding what was going on, and I kept hearing my name called, and I went to the door, which was open 6 inches. Mom, please leave the hall light on. She had gone to bed, had clicked the light off, and I heard my name called, and I heard compassion and love and kindness and welcome, but I didn't know the voice. And I went for the doorknob, and my hand passed through, and the voice said, just walk through. And so I walked through the door out into the hallway, and it's upstairs, and I looked, and it was all sepatone, and I looked down the stairs, and on the landing, it's like this stairs go down, and then they turn and go down. There was an elephant, and the elephant was a small elephant, and it was hyper intelligent and full of compassion, and had black eyes, solid black eyes, and it was dressed in Indian garb, and it communicated to me telepathically, come to me. And I went down the stairs, and I fell into its eyes. And inside its eyes, there was the whole universe of love and beauty and wisdom and understanding. And I came out of the eyes, and the elephant said to me, now go down the stairs, out the door, into the road, and look at the universe. And so I did. I went down the stairs, and I passed through the front doors, out onto the lawn, down onto the roadway, and I looked up, and I saw the stars above with moon shining, and then suddenly the whole thing expanded, and I could see all of universal creation, and it scared me.
Yeah, that would be pretty intense.
I was overwhelmed, and instantaneously, in my awe, I was back in my body again. And so I woke up in my bedroom in the dark, sat up, left the room, hunted the house over, even into the scary dark cellar that was locked at night, looking for the elephant of compassion, and could never find, and stayed up for a while and went to bed. And that was how it all began.
Okay, wait, how old were you?
5 or 6.
Do you think that elephant was Ganesh?
I do now.
Wow.
I was an Orthodox, Greek Orthodox, Roman Catholic boy.
Right, so you're not.
What did I know of Ganesh?
Right.
You know, or Hinduism, or India, or, you know, Boston, which was right down the road. I was not a worldly child. You know?
Right. No, you wouldn't know, but that's what it feels like to me, which is like incredible.
Yes,
Then
that's.
what do you do with that? Like, you're 5 or 6 years old, and you have, I mean, that's like universal knowledge downloading into your brain. How do you process that or handle that at that age?
I didn't say anything about it, and about a year later, it was like my brother was a little bit older, and my mom was ironing clothes, and maybe I was a kindergarten student, maybe it was the same year. I don't know, but it was a sunny afternoon, and I had the afternoon off, and baby was sleeping upstairs, and I got kicked out of the house. And so I went and I climbed my favorite maple tree, and I climbed the tree, and I sat in this little nook, and all the leaves were shimmering, all these two-tone colors, and the wind was blowing through, and then I heard this voice that was from way above me, and it was like this elongated thing that was inside of me, outside of me, in heaven, the voice of God, and the voice of the angel that I knew was now an angel behind me, speaking to me, saying, you're mine, you belong to me, come, you are my creature. And when that ended, I got off the tree. And this is to answer your question. I went back into the house, and my mom got mad at me because I came in. I was supposed to be outside. She's like, ironing the clothes. What are you doing in here? And I said, Mom, an angel just talked to me. And my mom said, what do you mean? And the angel said, in my little mind of Catholic boy, Greek Orthodox kid, I need to be a priest. God has called me to be a priest. That's my role. And my mom said something like, oh, that's good. I'm going to have to teach you to sew, iron, and dust, because you're not going to have someone to do that for you. Get a dust rag.
Were you like, what kind of deal is this? I just told you that God was talking to me, and you're having me iron? What the hell?
That's how it all. And so I kind of learned young to keep my mouth shut.
Mm-hmm. So do you feel like she just completely did not understand what you were saying? Like,
she couldn't possibly understand. It's noetic knowledge. It's this thing that happens that it processes through your brain, but it actually communicates first to your soul. It communicates to, and it's sort of like both an informational thing and a remembering thing at the same time. But it leaves what I call it left a mark on my soul, or a downloaded data bits that are permanently part of my software that's in the cloud. And it gets filtered out through my hardware, and I use the tools that I have to express understanding. And so for me, I was a priest. I had to be a priest. Right. But that's not the message itself. And how do you communicate that to someone? You can't tell the truth about the truth you've learned, because words can't contain it.
No, and you also don't want to like overwhelm the other person or confuse them, because there's energy behind even having that experience and then talking about it. And I think if you're just like talking to a random person, they have no context at all, to deal with what you're telling them, you're going to really confuse them in a way. And that's not a positive.
And you're going to sound crazy.
And you're going to totally sound crazy, which at this point I'm over that because I felt that way my whole life. Like I was like, I can't talk about this stuff because I'm going to, well, and I actually feel like if I did bring it up when I was younger, people would be like, you're crazy. And I took it to heart, you know, like it wasn't like crazy fun. It was like, you're bonkers.
Right.
So,
who wants to have that label?
no, that's not a fun label to have. But
No.
I had an experience like that when I was like in my 20s. I had broken up with a boyfriend. I was crying in my bathroom. I was like hysterical. I couldn't pull it together. And then it's exactly as you said, like this voice came from like everywhere. Like it was like 360 into my soul. And it was God. It said, be kind. And it was like this voice that came through my whole body and it stopped me in my tracks. I was like pulled out of my sadness. It was gone. It was like, I just stood up, picked up the phone, called my mom, told her exactly what happened. And she was just crying on the other line just because she knew what that was. I kind of knew what it was, but I was so shocked. And it was like those two words, just being told that just changed everything in that moment. And it was like my sadness was removed from me. It was like a miracle.
You were be kind to yourself. You were being kind. It became part of you.
It absolutely became part of me. And from that point forward, I must have thought the words in my mind a billion times, like just be kind.
Like a chant, like a prayer chant that you were given.
Yeah, really. That was like a major thing that happened. So I understand how, I mean, you were young though. I don't know how you processed that. Well, you told your mom you wanted to be a priest.
And she's like, okay, get a Dutch rag, get the pledge, clean the kitchen, clean the dining room table.
She was never going to let you get a big head.
No, no, that was never a problem.
No. Oh my God. Okay.
No.
So now these things are
No, I mean, she made sure it wasn't a problem is what I meant to say.
right. No, I know. She wasn't going to let that happen. Okay. So you're a kid, you start having, out of body experiences. God is talking to you, like you're in it. You're like entering the vortex, 5, 6 years old. So now fast forward, what happens to you when you're going to college? I know you went to school in Montana, right?
Yes, I national student exchange 1 year in Bozeman at Montana State University because of the skiing and the mountain climbing and far away from family.
And did nature did you feel?
Oh yeah, nature was always my prayer church.
Mm-hmm.
More than church was my church.
Mm-hmm.
Being outside and being in nature, it's fed me then, it feeds me now.
Mm-hmm.
Now it becomes essential to me. It became essential to me because of what happened out there. And so are you asking me to say what happened out there?
Well, yeah, I just wanted to get a little background of you going away to college and you're skiing and you're super active. And then this leads up to the first near-death experience.
Yes, I was a Boy Scout for most of my life. So I was a backpacking camper, mountain climber, not tire, fire, lighter, all that stuff, merit badges. But I continued that all through high school and college. And in college, I became a backpacking mountaineer kind of guy.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went to Montana in part to spend time in the wilderness, which I did a lot of. And on one trip, in March vacation, I was looking for a partner to go do something exciting and adventurous. And I found this guy, he found me, and we ended up going to British Columbia and Alberta to spend 10 total days snow caving and 1 day of ice climbing.
Had you ever done that before?
I'd snow caved
Mm-hmm.
I backcountry skied before, and I winter camped a lot. I had climbed high peaks, and I'd rock climbed, face climbed, but never ice climbed.
Okay.
Same basic equipment, ropes and harnesses and that kind of stuff, but there's some differences. And so, but it was a world famous climb, and he was a lead climber. He was a certified lead climber.
Mm-hmm.
So he wasn't just like saying
like you were like in good hands,
right,
with some Yahoo.
Right, exactly. And I was a National Ski Patrol, and I had a certification.
Mm-hmm.
And so my certification was first responder wilderness. And so we were a good team. He knows his stuff, I know my stuff. We can balance each other out. So we go climbing on this climb. I decide I borrow all my equipment he owns all of his. I get everything that I can scrounging around. I end up with an axe and a hammer instead of 2 axes. And the hammer is much smaller. It slows my climb down by hours and hours and hours. We get to the top of the climb. All the other teams have been climbing. They leave. Temperature drops 30 degrees. Hypothermia begins immediately because we're not dressed for 30 degrees lower, and we're sweaty, and so we're wet. And then I could cut to the chase, which is we decide to we were going to die where we were, or we were going to die trying to get off the mountain. And we decided we'd try to get down. And so we went through a harrowing night of terrible things. And we finally get to our last rappel, which is with the last length of the rope to go down to the bottom. And the rope gets jammed, and it's a couple hours before dawn, and hypothermia has frostbite. I don't know if you noticed, I had a black Band-Aid on my finger when we first talked.
I did notice that earlier. And it looks like you smashed your thumb too.
Oh, I did.
I'm like, what's going on over there?
So I took off the black tape because I got frostbite all over. I got frostbite from that night, and my fingers split open.
Fingers?
Yeah, frozen fingers, frozen nose, frozen cheeks, feet like blocks of ice, hypothermia to the place. We've gone through all the stages. Last final stage is when your body, or second to last stage, is when your body, all of your core heat rushes to your extremities in order to save your digits and your a sense of temperature, of actual temperature, because your body registers its temperature on its skin. And so the body misregisters the temperature, all the blood rushes out, you get really hot. I unzipped my coat, even though I know in my head, oh, I know what's going on. And I've been pulling people off the mountain with hypothermia because it's been 50 below where I've been ski patrol. Okay. And so I know what's going on, but I don't really care because my brain's all frozen and a muddle, and I unzip my coat, and my temperature, because I'm hot, my core temperature drops even further. I begin to fall asleep. I smack on the rock because I'm harnessed in. I wake up, I pull myself up, I get the last stage, which is this tunnel vision where the blood pressure changes in your eyes, and
oh my God.
And as this goes out, I feel myself collapse. I'm still conscious inside my head. Every other time I'd fallen asleep, I was unconscious. I'm still conscious, and like, why am I conscious? I don't feel my body anymore. I don't feel myself crash. And I got, long story short, and I'll leave out most of the details. I was scooped up by a super intelligent being. I was told I was being taken. I resisted with all my strength. It came from a great distance of darkness and rushed to me at faster than 10 times the speed of light, or 100,000 times the speed of light, from an incredible distance, and took me and brought me to a place of non-being, where I shed my body and my soul, my spirit, and I was like an orb, a super expanded orb of consciousness, much larger than my body, that my mind and all of my brain-based senses were all contained in this sphere and more. So I was an eyeball, an ear, a brain, all one non-being, non-thing in an eternal, infinite, paradoxical, illuminated darkness.
It's kind of funny to think that you were like trying to fight that at first. Like you did not have a chance.
I did not have a chance, and I didn't. Well, because all night long my goal all night was survival, and I can't tell you how much willpower I found inside myself that night to stay alive. And I think it's a really human thing when you're under incredible stress, that survival becomes single-minded, an act of stripped down will. My body had no more reserves left. I had consumed. My body was consuming itself to survive. It's like
the most extreme situation. I mean, it's so much. It's like everything was going wrong. It's so like it's hard for me to comprehend you up on that mountain, like freezing to death. It's so intense. Of course you would be fighting back. You're not going to be like, I don't know, let's just see what happens. No, I mean,
going down.
You were going down.
we were going down step by step. We knew we were going down physically in two ways, as you mean, and as we were going down, it got worse and worse and worse, just like you said. And so I resisted because I thought I didn't know what I was looking at. I was afraid. Okay? The fear was this huge motivator all night. Fear of dying, fear of death. I'd gone to church. I had a faith. I'd been visited by Ganesh. I'd had other experiences beyond this one that I'm describing now, and the ones I mentioned before. So I was not. I wasn't inexperienced, but I didn't want to die.
Right. Of course not.
Because so I fought and had no chance but surrender. And where do I say now? I can talk about hell or love or
what happens when you surrender and now you're just in it?
I remembered myself. That's the first thing. I'm like, this is me.
Like you were connected to your true self at this point.
I had no false self left.
Oh my God, I have chills all over my body. That's amazing. Okay.
And so I was in lots of things. I'm in a place of timelessness. It's eternal now. So all future, all past, and all time and all space, and a bazillion times more than that is all in this one place. And it's always now. And it's everything I say is paradoxical. Everything I say is metaphor, because I've spent my life trying to figure out how to talk about that which I can't actually say, because I was ordered to talk about it, even though you can't talk about it. So
it's too complicated. I mean, there's no word. How can you have?
It's too complicated. It's too complicated. So essentially, this is what happened: is that I'm in this infinite, eternal darkness, and I can see in every direction. I remember myself, and I'm not afraid at all. I'm completely content. I'm not even thinking about what I was before. And then sort of this portal opens up in front of me or next to me or underneath me. And I reach with myself to touch it. And as I reach with myself to touch it, there's this shimmer of translucent transparency, both that has substance, and yet I can see clearly through into this super long, more structured tunnel of darkness than the tunnel I came up or than the place I was in. And as I touched this, turns out this flow was living itself, was life itself, was all life, was all the almighty, the creator, the love, the beauty, the joy. It was the totality of the being of God. And as I touched this, it entered into me and called my name, which was not Peter, like my soul, the essence of the being of my soul's self. And I could see simultaneously the long, eternal, everlasting tale of my soul self from the moment of its origin creation as like a photon, a singular photon of a wave and particle from the greatest, immense light that there is, of the same light, but totally individuated. So like two things at once, both this and this. And I knew I was creature in the presence of creator, capital C, and little c creature. And I was beloved, and I was known. Everything was known about me, not only just the knowing of my Peter life, but the knowing of my entire eternal soul self was known. And the voice, and then I went through this suffering that Peter had given away all of my life, all of the pain I'd given to everyone my entire life. This is all at the same time. So this is like
this is the life review happening.
About to happen.
Okay.
But it's also non-sequential. So it's like all at the same time.
Okay. Like
And so,
layered on top of each other, or just like it's all.
yeah, like quadruple layered chess,
Mm-hmm.
or like, yeah, I don't even know how to describe it. And so I suffered all the pain that I gave everyone my entire life from their point of view. All the pain I intended to give them and all the pain I didn't intend to give them, only it turned out it was 10,000 times each little drop of pain, of suffering that I meant or did not mean to give them was 10,000 times greater than the suffering that I had thought that I'd given them. And it turned out that I gave it to myself and to them.
All that suffering was then turned back onto yourself.
It became me. And so I suffered all of their pain times 10,000, simultaneously experiencing and seeing and understanding each event as the pain was given, and each event of the decisions that I was making or accidentally chose to cause the pain that they were having. And I self-reflected interiorly, shamefully, that I had caused so much pain to them, not knowing, and had given it to myself. Meanwhile, this voice that has no sound or gender or language says inside of me, very similar to the way that you describe it, outside, around, underneath, inside, in, filling, saying, I love you, I made you, I've known you, I created you, see yourself, I love you as you are, I've always known this about you, I forgive you, it's not your fault that you were born human in the realm where this is the norm, because we all live in the realm of suffering, and we suffer and give suffering, and that it's not our fault. It's the structure of the very universe, and I forgive you and love you. And then it was like, and here I think about Catherine of Genoa, who went through and I steal her phrase, the divine fire of purgative love. I was, all of this was burned out of me. And it felt eternal as I went through this, okay? Because it's all time now. And then it was over, and I was infilled with this huge combination of, but it was all one thing. There's all these things we separate: joy, love, beauty, hope, compassion, knowledge, understanding, bliss, paradise, healing, wholeness, adoration, awe. The list goes on and on and on and on and on. But it's all one experience of infilling of divine oneness that was both much larger than I'd ever had before, and yet I understood was my true self, and that one more drop of it would have obliterated me into being consumed by the one. And so I remained both connected and individuated, but I wasn't individuated. It's funny. It's like I was all soul, but there was a little bit of Peter left.
Enough to like be able to pull you back.
Yeah, or to make me have a conversation. So I said, am I dead? And the voice said, yes, you're dead. And I said, well, I can't die now. I've got problems in my family life, and my parents can't lose another kid. And so I was then swept and shown all of the earth all at once in a flash of thought. I saw every individuated human being doing all the 7 billion things that humans do at that moment under a veil. And I could see my parents' faces in particular and their suffering. And the voice said to me, in the way that you now know that I love you, you now know I have always loved you. Always do and will, with this love that's 10 trillion times greater than those words can convey. I can't tell you how great it is, and that I had loved every single human being like that. Each of you are my particular beloved, your parents included, and because of my healing love, when they die in the end, all will be well for them too, just as it is for you. Come home to me.
Oh my God, that is so, I'm gonna cry. That's so beautiful. It's like, oh my God, how, okay, just keep going. So now what's happening? Now you're like having a full-blown conversation with God.
And the message to me was ultimate, eternal, infinite love, and come back to me, because all is well for every human being, even when they don't know it. Because in the end, they'll discover that they've always been this other thing, just like you know. You never really were this other thing. You just forgot
Right.
Nature of existence, you forget. And so I said, but I haven't got through the tunnel yet. And the voice said, no. I said, well, I've got this other reason. I was leaving on this theater tour. I made a commitment, and it was just laughable. But I said, for the sake of my parents, if I go back to my life, can I come back here? And God said, come home. But yes, you can come back here. And I said, I choose to live my life. And then I saw all these paths open up in front of me, all these choices, to 10,000 choices of entry paths I could take, in the core of which was the brighter and brighter and brighter and brighter light. And all these paths intersected, and I chose one not in the core, but up off to the side. And the voice said to me, you won't live your life. And sent me back. And the next thing I knew, I was dangling on the cliff, and my partner Tim was shaking on me. But it took me this long. I felt like I had to be crushed down to fit in my body, and then screwed in like an ice screw, slowly and painfully cracking into the ice. And once I was inside, I swam to consciousness, but I didn't know what this thing was. I didn't know what my brain was, or seeing, or smelling, or tasting, or feeling, or thinking, or processing information. I didn't understand any of it. I felt like and it hurt. And I swam to consciousness, and Tim pulled me up, and he's screaming and yelling at me. And at some point I could understand him, and he was saying, you were dead. You were dead, and if you died, I was going to die.
Oh my God, poor Tim too, experiencing that.
Oh, it was awful for both of us. And the story goes on, but that's
Okay, I have a question. Like, if you had to do it all over again, which I don't want you to die, but if you had to do it all over again, like, would you have come back knowing what you know now?
I don't know. No one's ever asked me that before. I've always, and one of the results of what happened to me was that I came back with no fear of death. And I tested that in 2015 when I had a heart attack and was taken again by the same angel of death. My friend, the angel of death, came to collect me. Was it the
same experience?
Very similar beginning. I didn't go as far. I knew what was going on. And so I chose to come back this time for my granddaughter, because of family circumstances. Daughter married in college. He went off to Afghanistan. Terrible, terrible things happened over there. He came back a very broken person. There was a baby. She left him. She needed me. And so I
still hang on to that, like, human.
Yeah, I chose
thought process or something, right? It's not like completely removed from you if you're having those thoughts, like.
No, there's a point at which it's stripped away. I could have it on either journey, gone further in. I was on, I guess you could, in old language, I was on the threshold of the pearly gates. But it wasn't, some people go to this place of corporeality where there's some sort of physicality, like Eben Alexander, and there's like a bazillion more colors than you've ever seen, and music with 1,000 more notes, right? All that kind of stuff. I didn't go to that place. I went to the place of no self. I went to the place of less form than the layers of, and if I had gone through that tunnel, maybe I would have gone to another form space, another form heaven.
A person with a harp waiting for you on the other.
Could have been.
I mean, yeah, no, seriously, like, because people have those. It's so common that they have those experiences, and I'm like, do they have those experiences because that's what would be comfortable for that particular person? That's more familiar for them.
I think that that's generally true. I think that God speaks to us in concepts that we can comprehend. And the what happened to me was the was a more direct, less layered experience. I went through hell. Did I go through hell because I believed in hell? I don't know the answer to that question. I do know that I caused a lot of pain in my life, and that in order to get into the presence through the pearly gate, even though I didn't actually go through that portal, in order to be infilled by the oneness of being, I had to be cleansed of the dross that I carried across. And the other thing I carried with me was all the love I gave away, which turned out to be 10,000 times greater than all the love that I thought I gave away per drop. And all the love that was given to me, the same deal. And I got to carry twice the load. I carried twice the load of love than I carried of pain, because the pain that people gave me, I didn't seem to have to go through. And it seemed to me that the love itself was the portal for me.
Now, I've heard you say in other interviews that like God is your number one. There's no
number two.
There's really no.
Well, there are number twos, but
right. But and I have also had that experience, which for me has made life a little complicated as far as like relationships and stuff like that, because it feels like nothing can compare.
Nothing can compare.
So it makes it, you know, and we're not the only people having this experience. Like it just makes this world a little bit more complicated because my attention keeps going in that direction. Like I have a foot in each realm. And so my question to you is, now you have this unbelievable experience. You have literally like touched the hand of God. You're there. Now you got to come back and now you have to live your life. And how do you do that? Like obviously you got married and had kids and had somewhat of a normal life. I mean, I know you're not totally normal because that's not possible anymore, but how did you do that?
The first thing I did was meditate. And when I say the first thing I did, I mean that frankly and literally.
Like on the side of the mountain?
The next day, as soon as I was in the car. I had to actually sleep first because I was exhausted. The first thing I did after sleeping was do a little meditation. I slept a lot. So it wasn't, I didn't actually meditate until the night after. So one night we die, a night passes the next morning. Because in the meanwhile, a lot of other stuff happened. We totaled the car in a semi. We got in jail. I bet it's just like
all crazy. Hell broke loose back.
So the first quiet moment.
Do I need to repeat my question? Are you sure you wanted to come back?
No, I didn't want to come back. I made the mistake. I didn't want to come back. That was really what happened. It's the first decision was, what a mistake.
Okay.
What a mistake I made. And I kept that what a mistake I made attitude until 2015.
Until it happened again?
Until it happened again and I chose to stay here. I've been waiting to leave. Once I came out and told people, I told my wife, I told my kids, first chance I get, I'm out of here. So first again, legitimate chance.
That's what I'm talking about. Like
it's hard for them.
Well, of course it is. No one wants to hear that from their husband or their dad or whatever. But I know that's real inside because it's happened to me where I'm like, I've had so many family members die and lots of pain, and I have experienced death directly through them, and all sorts of unbelievable things have happened. And I just keep telling myself, like, there's no time. Like, this is going to be over before I know it. So don't worry about it. But that's really me saying, like, I'm ready. When it comes, like, I'm going. I'm not turning back. And that's kind of an unusual mindset to have when you're like a human being walking around living your life.
It is. It is. And then I chose
to work, get married, have a family. Like
I did, life. But I early on, I changed the course of the direction of my life. I was going to be I was going to go to architecture graduate school. Instead, I go to divinity school, and I study mysticism. And I start going to the monastery where I'd been introduced to when I was in Catholic boys' school. And,
that's a sign.
Yep.
That's a clear sign.
And so I found my way. I read Paramahansa Yogananda, which happened, I just got my copy back from somebody I lent it to.
I mean, that's a life-changing book.
It's a
There's like a little bit
life-changing
of a
book.
roadmap of this type of life.
And and then I decided I spent 3 years doing independent study at Yale as a grad degree, studying mysticism under the dean as an independent student that nobody else was studying. And I practiced my meditation. And so I went in order to survive here, I went inside because I early understood that the interior is vaster than the exterior. And so how do I do that? I had to learn how to do that. And so that's what my studies have all been about. And that's how I've learned my practice, my prayer practice life, which is the core of my spirituality in the world, with the exception of nature, which is feeds me because it does. And I kept it a secret. I got ordained in the United Church of Christ. The dean talked me into it, and I kept it a secret for 20 years in the church because, you can't talk about mysticism in Protestant land. You can talk about mysticism in Orthodoxy land.
Yeah.
But you can't talk about, because, too much reason and rationality over on this side. They generally have no idea what I was talking about. So I kept it to myself and kept my practice going.
Did you feel like your professors and classmates and stuff at Yale could understand you at all? Or was...
Oh, no, there was a world famous theologian who came for a year to teach at Yale from Belgium, and I won't tell you his name, but he had a lecture downtown, and it was 100 students about mysticism. It was a survey course of Western mysticism, and I went and I showed up to tell the whole story. I was late for class one day, and so I hopped on my bike and I rode across New Haven and through bad neighborhoods, sprinting to get to class on time. And when I got there, I'd forgotten my shirt. And so, because I've been sitting in my apartment without a shirt on. So I get there and I'm like,
oh, your bike with no shirt on all the way across town.
Well, okay, so I did. So I get there and I don't have my shirt with me, but I want to go to his lecture because it's like, I want this stuff. So I go in and I sit down and I hide and I slink down in my chair really low so that he can't see me, sitting with my friends. And suddenly he stops his lecture and he points at me and he says, "You," and with his French accent, "I have no nakedness in my class." Out. So I got kicked out of class in front of everybody, half naked, and had to go. So I sat by the door and I took notes. And so I went home and I got a shirt, and I came back to see him in his office. And I sat in his office. There's this world famous, knowledgeable about the history of mysticism. And we have this little talk, and I don't tell him the whole story because I can't tell him. So I tell him about my practice of spirituality, and he says to me, "You're never going to be a mystic. You're never going to achieve that level of union. You will fail. Now get out of my office."
Yikes.
So no, to answer your question, worst case scenario, I didn't tell anybody. I'm off doing yoga. This is the early '80s, and I'm off doing yoga in my leotard, because no yoga clothes in those days, and I'm meditating all the time, and everybody knows I'm a little strange, and they love me, we love each other, but I'm a little weird, and so no, I didn't tell anybody. Why would I tell anybody ever?
Do you feel, this is how I feel, so I want to ask you, like, I meditate every day, obviously, like, I talk about the story. When I learned to meditate, it was like, I walked in the door, one person, 20 minutes later, I was a completely transformed person, like game over, no turning back. The lights came on, everything changed. And so since that day, I've meditated every day, and it feels to me, from all the reading and all the videos I've watched of near-death experiences, it feels like I'm falling into that back and forth every day, into that realm, back into this realm. It's just like constant in and out. And now it feels like familiar to me that the landscape of this other dimension that I fall into that feels like somewhere we would go, like when we pass away. But I don't know if I've made that up in my head, because it just feels like I dip into it. And so when I think about death and add up all my experiences and put them together with the meditation practice, it's like, I feel like I know where I'm going, because I feel like I go there every day.
Well,
Does that make sense?
yes, it does. And yes, you do. And that's what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And I had the same experience on the first day I meditated too, back in '77 in Catholic boys' school.
Wow.
The same thing. He came in and he taught the centering prayer. And ever since then, every day. So, but yes. So do you ever hear this guy named Swedenborg?
Mm-mm.
Swedenborg. He was a 1500s Lutheran pastor who had a near-death experience.
Mm-hmm.
And he created this whole understanding. Is worth looking up, as Emanuel Swedenborg. But in his writings, he talks about each level of heaven that you go to feels like the totality of the being and all of the knowledge exists.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a pure experience of the oneness until you get to the next level, at which you experience the totality of all being, and it feels like you have all the oneness that ever existed until you get to the next level.
Mm-hmm.
So even when you're falling inside yourself,
ending.
It's never ending.
Never ending.
So when you fall inside yourself, you're falling into that same never-ending space.
Mm-hmm.
So even for all the people who are listening who have fallen into that place once or twice, you're touching into the divine itself.
Mm-hmm. And that gives you an inner strength that I don't think you could ever find outside of yourself.
You can't.
I mean, I don't think it's possible. It's given me everything. It's the most important thing in my life.
It's the most important thing in my life.
Mm-hmm.
It's given me everything, and it is my strength. It's how I've endured in all sorts of wild ministry stories of ministry on the edge of the wild.
Mm-hmm.
Embezzlements, murderers, decapitations, fires, terrible things.
I think when you work for God, all sorts of things just start shooting into your life. You're like in a video game or something.
Yeah. Well, there's this painting, and I want to say it's Saint Sebastian, and he's like tied up, and all these demons around him, and he's stuck with arrows. You ever see that? He's got like 30 arrows in him, and he's not dead. And,
you're like, that poor bastard.
Exactly. But that's what happens when you enter the spiritual life.
Mm-hmm.
You become a target.
I always tell people, like, yes, do it, but hold on to your hat, because it's going to get crazy sometimes. And there really is no roadmap. Every individual, it's so different for all of us. But you try and talk to other people that understand, have been there before you, and read books and watch videos, and it all helps. But really, you just have to go through it yourself, and it gets totally fucking crazy sometimes.
It does, and it gets better. So it's like this: the further you go, the deeper it gets. And so no matter how crazy it gets, mm-hmm. you get this deeper sense of centeredness. This, mm-hmm. or like that you go deeper in the ocean where there's less turbulence. So the turbulence doesn't change. Mm-hmm. It's just that you're able to have more strength, and you're right.
Yeah, I mean,
it's crazy.
Start noticing, like, God, I can handle people dying. I can handle anything that life throws my way, and you feel unshakable. But if you do stop and think about it, you're like, wow, that's been a lot, and it's been very unusual. And how am I able to handle all of this? It's shocking at first when you first start having those experiences, and I don't know how else to describe it except you feel unshakable.
And the most amazing thing, I think, of our conversation is that we experience the same thing. And that's a very human thing. Mm-hmm. It's not just us.
Right.
It's accessible to every single person that lives. It doesn't matter who you are or where you're from.
It's the reason I do all this. I want people to hear conversations like this that have had similar experiences and be like, oh, this is not crazy. This is actually my life opening up to me.
And the reason why we're able to talk about it is because we're opening up to each other. And so we're taking a risk of telling the truth. And it's my thought, we talk about this off camera, it's my thought that more people have mystical experiences than know it. They just don't know what to call it. And the example I use is someone who has a visitation from the dead, someone who they love, who comes to visit them and telecommunicates some message of love or beauty and or wellness or wholeness or healing or whatever. And that they shift from believing in the afterlife to knowing that the afterlife is real for that person. And that is a mystical knowing. This isn't just the exclusive, it's not an exclusive club. Everybody's in it.
That's right. You know, one of my favorite quotes is from Joseph Campbell. He says, like, I don't have to have faith. I have experience. And I think once you start having those experiences, it's not about like belief or faith. Like, yeah, you know, I have faith in God. No, you know God. You've been there. You're like, you know. It's more real to me than any experiences I ever have like in my day-to-day life. Like, that's how real God is to me. I experience it directly. Even after I learned to meditate, I said to my TM teacher, like, I don't need to go to church. I don't need a middleman anymore. You just gave me the tool to like pick up the phone and give God a ring, you know, and he answers. So I feel like when you cross that Rubicon and you start having these direct experiences, it's like belief, faith, all that kind of goes out the window, and you are like in your power. You're connected, and you know it. And no one can ever take that away from you.
No, because it doesn't register in your brain. It registers in your soul first. Yeah. The brain of your soul is where Jesus talks about, make your eye single and your body will be filled with light. It's in the same realm as what I'm trying to say here, is that the message doesn't happen to your two eyes. You see it with your one eye, and in the same way you have this one eye, you have one brain in your soul too. And so it's not this physical one up here. And I'm kind of messing up that metaphor. I got to figure that one out. I'll get that one.
It's a knowing. It's like in the cells of your body. It is a coming home. It is. That's like, I like that description. It feels that everything feels familiar but different at the same time. But it's a fascinating ride. So I wanted to ask you, and I always ask all my guests this. When I had this experience of transformation, learning to meditate, and everything was different, I realized that everything I thought I knew was wrong. I had now woken up into opposite land, and I had to figure out a way to figure out my life. Like, how am I going to live now when all these theories and all these ideas I had no longer worked for me? So my question to you is, what, after your near-death experience or any of these experiences that changed you in a radical way, what is something that you thought you knew for sure, but you were dead wrong?
Oh, that God had religion. God has no religion. God's beyond religion. Religion is a concept of humanity, and the direct experience of the divine is where it's at. And it's love that's the mechanism by which we experience that commonly. Mystical experiences, that's a big part of it too, but commonly, it's the love we share and the love we give away. And that was the message of Jesus. Love thy neighbor as thyself. Love thy neighbor as thyself, and love God above all things. Seek heaven first. Make your eyes single and your body will be filled with light. And that, like you said earlier, it's not Jesus and his last name is Christ. It's, it's the divine light Christ, the Christ consciousness is available to us all, and actually never left. It's not been, we're not waiting for the return. It's still here now. And it's always been here now. He tapped into it, so can we. John's in the Gospel of John says the light is coming into the world with a capital L, and then Jesus tells everybody he meets, you are the light of the world.
Oh my God, that's so beautiful. You were like my favorite person. Seriously, you're so wonderful. I'm so happy you came on the show. I want to talk to you more, and I'm excited for your new book to come out. When is that happening?
Well,
you're in the process of writing it now,
yeah,
right?
I've got a couple chapters left to write. I've been writing it for 9 months, and I got to get it to my agent who gets it to the publisher. So maybe, if it was up to me, I'd like to see it out for next Christmas. I think that would be nice, but I think that might be too short. It might be Easter next year. And I should say summer's equinox. I'll say spring equinox next year. Be inclusive of everybody. And so that I'm working on. It's called The Modern Mysticism and You.
We need more books like that. We need to be talking about it.
Can I tell you a just about public secret?
Yes. I'm like, yes.
So I'm conspiratorially signing a contract in the next 2 weeks for a feature film.
Nice.
Books getting optioned by a major producer, and we're deep into dialogue. Contract has been written. Agents are involved, and so haven't dotted the.
Happening.
Well, every one of us who puts out the light contributes to the whole of it. And it's estimated there's 10 million near-death experiencers. I bet there's 50 million spiritual experiencers, and that as a group, all of us who aim the light into the world, we work together toward a higher good for us all.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I'm never going to stop doing the work that I do. That's why I'm here. And I know that. And I know the more people we can touch, the more people that will come forward and say, I'm having these experiences. I'm having these thoughts. Let's talk about it. It just grows stronger and stronger. It's the reason I like being in Fairfield, Iowa. It's a spiritual community. And the energy from everyone meditating and having these experiences, you can feel it in the air.
Drink that water. I'll toast you.
I just choked on my deep thoughts.
It's okay. Take it easy. Hold on. You take your time. She's all choked up because of the spiritual nature of her town and her community. It just breaks her up.
Oh my God. Hold on.
You okay?
Mm-hmm. The cold is still lingering like this much.
And there's the human nature of the human being. Because, I guess this is a big difference between television and podcasting. Podcasting is a lot more real, and reality TV is not.
No, this isn't the Kardashians.
It is not.
It is not. Thank you so much for being on the show. I will have all your links in YouTube for your website and your books, and I'm just so happy that I talked to you.
Vice versa.
I've been thinking about you for like 3 years, which is crazy. So it was a great experience to get together.
Same here. And I've been enjoyed following you for all these years too.
Thanks, Peter. I will talk to you soon.
All right. Peace and love.
Peace and love. Thanks for joining me this week. If you're digging what I'm throwing down, subscribe, rate, and review this podcast on Apple Podcasts or your favorite listening app. I'll be back next Wednesday with a brand new episode featuring another killer conversation about how to start living a transformed life.